March 31st, 1995, an Airbus A310 leaves Bucharest for Brussels with 60 people on board. The weather is poor, but flyable. The aircraft is airworthy, the crew is experienced. Nothing about the departure suggests that the flight will last only 89 seconds. During the climb, the left thrust lever begins moving backward. One engine produces less thrust, and the aircraft starts rolling inside cloud. At almost the same moment, the captain stops responding. The first officer is left with an asymmetric aircraft, confusing indications, and almost no time. The official investigation would identify 3 factors: thrust, asymmetry, possible captain incapacitation, and insufficient corrective action by the first officer. This is the evidence behind TAROM Flight 371, Romania's deadliest aviation accident. The aircraft is YRLCC, an Airbus A310-324, named Montenia. It entered service in 1987. It is powered by 2 Pratt & Whitney PW4152 engines. By the morning of the accident, the airframe has accumulated more than 31,000 flight hours. The scheduled route is routine Bucharest-Otopeni to Brussels. On board are 49 passengers and 11 crew members. Outside, low cloud covers the departure path. Visibility at the airport is reduced, yet the conditions remain within the limits for takeoff. The first minutes will be flown mainly on instruments that makes disciplined monitoring essential, especially during a turn and a configuration change. The aircraft itself carries one unresolved operational concern, already known to the operator and to the crew. Captain Liviu Batanoiu is 48 years old. He has more than 14,000 flight hours, including over 1,700 on the Airbus A310. First Officer Ionel Stoy is 51. He has nearly 9,000 flight hours and about 650 on type. For this sector, Stoy is the pilot flying. He will control the flight path. Batanoiu is the pilot monitoring, responsible for systems callouts and support. It is a normal division of duties, but one that depends on both pilots remaining active and coordinated. The official report found no evidence that either pilot began the flight unqualified. The danger lies not in a lack of total experience, but in how quickly the situation changes. One technical anomaly will demand attention at exactly the moment the crew's workload is rising. The A310 uses an automatic thrust system to position the thrust levers and manage engine power. On this aircraft, crews had reported a troubling behavior during the transition from takeoff power to climb power. Under some conditions, one thrust lever could continue moving toward idle instead of stopping with the other. This did not mean the engine was mechanically destroyed. It meant the commanded thrust on one side could fall while the opposite engine continued producing climb power. That creates asymmetric thrust. The stronger engine pushes the aircraft around its vertical axis and helps drive a roll toward the weaker side. The crew knew about the problem before departure. The captain indicated that he would guard the levers during the critical transition. It is a small detail with enormous consequences. The planned defense against the anomaly depends on one person remaining able to act. At 6:06 and 44 seconds Universal Time, 9:06 local time, Flight 371 begins its takeoff roll on runway 08 right. Both engines develop takeoff power. The aircraft accelerates normally and lifts into the cloud layer. The landing gear retracts. The first officer follows the departure, climbing and beginning the assigned left turn. Inside the cockpit, the sequence is familiar. Reduce from takeoff. To climb, thrust clean the wing, monitor speed and attitude, then engage automation when appropriate. But the aircraft is now in cloud. There is no reliable natural horizon, outside only the instruments and the coordination between two pilots. For the first 50 seconds, the flight remains close to the expected profile. At 6:07 and 36 seconds, the aircraft passes approximately 2,000 feet at 188 knots. The left engine's thrust begins decreasing continuously. The corresponding lever moves backward at roughly 1 degree per second. The right engine remains near climb power. The imbalance grows gradually, not as a single explosive failure, but as a developing control problem. A prompt response would require recognizing the split, restoring symmetrical thrust, and using rudder and roll control to hold the flight path. Instead, the crew continues the climb and configuration change, while the asymmetry becomes more pronounced. At 6:07 and 53, passing about 3,300 feet, the first officer calls for the flaps to be retracted. The captain completes that action. The first officer then calls for the slats. This time the captain does not respond. The technical problem has now merged with a second emergency. At 6:08 and 2 seconds, the first officer asks, "Are you all right?" There is no clear answer. 6 seconds later, the cockpit recorder captures a sound the investigation described as either a human utterance of pain or a metallic noise. From that point, the captain is no longer heard performing an effective cockpit role. The report could not determine exactly what happened medically. It recorded possible incapacitation, not a proven heart attack, and not a definitive diagnosis. For the first officer, the practical effect is immediate. He is now flying, diagnosing a thrust, split, managing configuration, and trying to understand why his colleague is silent. The left bank continues increasing without a visible horizon. Attitude awareness depends entirely on correct instrument interpretation and decisive control inputs. The available altitude is still recoverable, but the margin is shrinking by the second. At 6:08 and 15, the A310 reaches about 4,620 feet. Its bank angle has passed 43 degrees. The first officer, now audibly under stress, asks for autopilot number 1. Automation can reduce workload only when engagement conditions are satisfied, and the aircraft is within a controllable envelope. Here it does not stabilize the flight. The autopilot disconnect warning sounds, the roll steepens, and the nose begins dropping rapidly. The first officer says that one has failed. The phrase is short, but it shows that his attention is still divided among failures while the aircraft departs controlled flight. At one point, the pitch reaches more than 60 degrees. Nose down, airspeed rises through 250 knots. The engines are brought toward idle, but reducing thrust cannot by itself restore the lost attitude. The aircraft is descending too steeply and too quickly. There is no usable time left for a full recognition roll, recovery, and pull-out sequence. At 6:08 and 34 seconds Universal Time Flight 371 strikes a field near Balotești. The aircraft is traveling at roughly 324 knots, with the nose about 50 degrees below the horizon. The impact is unsurvivable. All 49 passengers and 11 crew members are killed. Only 89 seconds have passed since liftoff. The flight never leaves the immediate area around Bucharest. Emergency crews reach a scene of extreme fragmentation. Their work is recovery, identification, and securing the evidence needed to explain the loss. Investigators recover the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder. Together, they preserve the final seconds in parameters, sounds, warnings, and crew speech. The data reveal a continuous reduction of left engine thrust during the climb. The right engine does not mirror that reduction. The record also shows increasing bank failed stabilization, rapidly changing pitch, and a final high-speed descent. The wreckage does not support the simple story of an engine exploding or separating the evidence points, instead to the automatic thrust system and its mechanical linkage. Investigators examined friction in the coupling between the automatic thrust actuator and the lever mechanism. Excessive resistance could prevent the mechanism from stopping as intended, allowing one lever to continue toward idle during the power transition. Maintenance history and earlier crew reports mattered because they showed that the behavior was not entirely new on the morning of the crash. Yet a known anomaly does not automatically become an accident. Normally monitoring and immediate manual correction would break the chain. On Flight 371, that defensive layer was compromised when the pilot expected to guard the levers became unresponsive. The final report did not reduce the event to a single broken part or a single mistake. First came thrust asymmetry. It created yaw roll and a growing need for active control. Second came the possible incapacitation of the captain. It removed monitoring checklist support system handling and the planned protection against the lever anomaly. Third came insufficient corrective action by the first officer. The developing bank and attitude were not arrested while recovery was still possible. This does not mean the first officer faced a simple task. In seconds, he encountered a silent captain. Asymmetric power configuration demands cloud warnings and unsuccessful automation. But accident investigation asks what prevented recovery, not only what made the situation difficult. Some later accounts claim that an unfamiliar attitude display made the pilot react in the wrong direction. The official evidence could not establish that as the definitive explanation. The careful conclusion is narrower. The aircraft's attitude was not corrected soon enough, and the reason for every control input could not be fully determined. The accident led to renewed attention on the A310 automatic thrust linkage maintenance procedures and the need to eliminate excessive friction in the mechanism. Technical bulletins and modifications addressed the vulnerable parts of the system. Operators also reinforced inspection and response procedures. The broader lesson reaches beyond one aircraft type. A known defect cannot be controlled only by an informal promise to watch it. A safe system needs independent barriers, reliable hardware, effective maintenance, clear procedures, warning cues, and crews trained to recognize the failure quickly. At Balotești, a memorial carries the memory of the 60 people who never reached Brussels. Their flight lasted less than 2 minutes, but the evidence left behind shows how accidents are built from interacting failures, not dramatic myths. A thrust lever moved, a captain may have become incapacitated, a remaining pilot did not recover the attitude. Each event weakened the defense against the next. That chain, reconstructed from data, cockpit audio, wreckage, and maintenance records, is the lasting evidence of TAROM Flight 371. For air crash evidence, this is case 004. We remember the 60 lives lost at Balotești.